Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Blanck, World Eater. Blanck is the alias for Benjamin John Power, who is best known for being one half of the band Fuck Buttons. Now, Fuck Buttons is one of those bands I'd been meaning to get into ever since they appeared on Jean-Michel Jarre's Electronica 1 The Time Machine, and on one of the better tracks, no less, being Immortals. That song I particularly remember being really huge sounding, and it seems Fuck Buttons made a name for themselves for making huge sounding drone music, as well as having one of the best band names ever. Meanwhile, Power also became pretty successful on his own merits as Blanck. Anyway, after having checked out Fuck Buttons, to me they kind of feel like the more rock-heavy and happier version of Tim Hecker. Their textures are very rough and guitar feedback-ish, but they don't really go into the dark territories that Hecker typically explores. Their debut album even had quite a bit of metal screaming in the mix. Not gonna be the kind of thing everyone's gonna like, and wasn't really my thing either. But I did quite like their second album, Terret Sport. Much more post-rock in this one, pretty easily enjoyable. Despite the rough textures, it's got a weird spaciness to it, and it really is the point at which they sort of get their huge sound, and I'd undoubtedly recommend checking it out, as I would recommend their repetitive but still pretty engaging and also more electronic third album, Slow Focus. But this video isn't about Fuck Buttons, it's about Blanck. Now, obviously the guy's influence in Fuck Buttons is felt on his solo material. His self-titled debut was also quite spacious and dramatic, although it was much more toned down and ambient, and more abstract as well. It was a very strange and immersive album that I quite enjoyed. It was also pretty obvious to me why Jean-Michel Jarre decided to bring Fuck Buttons onto his albums. There are tracks on this album like Sub-Serious, which show a pretty obvious JMJ influence. His next album, Dumb Flesh, brought the Blanck sound, previously more ambient, into closer territory to Fuck Buttons, a lot rougher, bringing back some of that weird guitar feedback, distortion sort of sounds in some areas, but also bringing in some weird, experimental, but still oddly catchy, One Tricks Point Never Garden of Delete sound too. Though also becoming more subdued in some other areas. A lot going on this one, and a lot of variety. Very interesting album indeed, and probably one I could stand to put in more time to digest, but whatever. Now I'm kind of starting to realize this could have just been an in-brief segment, but oh well. That brings us to this latest project here. With the previous album having gone in a lot of different directions at once, I can't really say I had a lot of expectations going into this one. I guess I was expecting some more of that epic wall of sound type stuff that has characterized this guy's entire career, but what he would do with it next, I hadn't a clue. I just jumped into World Eater hoping for the best, and how'd it turn out? Well, I came out of World Eater with my mind just kind of scrambled and not really knowing what to think. That being said, I think World Eater is more focused than Dumb Flesh. It feels a bit more cohesive, and I think I just found it more enjoyable overall. There's quite a bit to unpack here. The intro, John Doe's Carnival of Error, was going to be my prime pick for a least favorite, given it was by far the shortest on the album, but in that small amount of time, it undoubtedly leaves an impact. The sample is really catchy, and its build-up only makes the track progressively more engaging. Speaking of impacts, then there's the next track, Rhesus Negative. This track is probably the one that was closest to what I expected out of this whole thing, the typical epic wall of sound kind of stuff. I was thinking of making this a least favorite because I thought it was the least surprising, but man, I really can't help but enjoy the sheer intensity and epicness of the whole thing. I think I heard some modulated choirs in there somewhere, and there's no quicker way to inject pure epicness into any track than by putting in choirs. Please could have been a least favorite, as I thought it was rather repetitive and maybe went on a bit too long, but I really like the catchy abstractness of all the vocal samples too. That's a really good track. I thought maybe The Rat could be a least favorite, as I found it to be the most forgettable track on here, but the rollicking percussiveness of everything and the catchy plaid-esque melodies played on Daniel Lopatin-esque synth tones were a ton of fun to listen to. I thought maybe Silent Treatment could be a least favorite. Well, actually no, I didn't. This was actually probably my personal favorite in the bunch. I think I mentioned that I like choirs, and this track uses quite a bit of them. Coming off somewhat similar to Please, but just as catchy and sounding pretty distinctive in its own right. Lots of warm vocal samples, many of which get modulated quite a bit, and some truly gorgeous passages found throughout. Minnesota/East Force/Naked could have been a least favorite, as I wasn't a huge fan of some certain passages. Mainly the beginning. I thought the first movement was a little uninteresting compared to some of the other spots on this album, even though it has like that abstract Tim Hecker feel to it. The second movement had a somewhat more memorable and more psychedelic bend to it, but the third movement officially kept it from being a candidate for the spot. Very chilled out, lots of watery sound effects, and then there's an instrumental sample right at the end that sounds kinda like vaporwave or something. I guess it was kinda dumb to think that a 3-movement track would be able to qualify as a least favorite, as the fact that it has 3 distinctive but linked movements makes it a standout automatically, so there is that too. Hive Mind, meanwhile, has probably the most conventional synth tones and sounds. Almost feels kind of trap influenced. And while I found its ending in the fade out to be pretty disappointing as well, all the wavering synth melodies and catchy vocal samples and just kind of overall chill feel it's got, once again, salvages the track for me. So overall, I guess I decided not to pick a least favorite at all. There's something to like and something not to like in every track, although significantly more of the former. It's a strange sounding album that pulls off a lot of abstract and intense and inaccessible sounds and turns them into something more accessible, much like Lopatin kinda did on Garden of Delete. I think there's a lot to like about this album, probably my favorite project from Blanck Mass to date, and I'd recommend checking it out, though I have no idea how many people still need to, as I'm pretty late to check this out myself, but whatever. It's not perfect, but this is some good stuff for sure. I'm overall feeling a 7.7 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion, you can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.